The rain had just stopped when Ethan Hale stepped off the transport ship. The black soil of Varix Prime was still wet, and his boots sank slightly with each step. The air carried the strange metallic scent this alien world was known for, mixed with something faintly sweet. Above him, green clouds swirled slowly, shimmering as though they were made of liquid light. It was beautiful, but the beauty felt hollow. He could feel the eyes on him. Dozens of tall, silver-marked aliens stood at a distance, their expressions unreadable. But there was something in their gaze, desperation, maybe fear. Ethan had never been to Varix Prime before. The only reason he was here was because the Varix Council had sent him an urgent message. It was short and strange. We require your presence to discuss the future of our people. No other explanation, no details, nothing about why he was needed. That alone had been enough to make him suspicious. 2 guards in silver armor escorted him through the capital. The city was unlike anything he had seen. Tall, black towers with veins of glowing blue crystal running through them. The streets were quiet, almost too quiet. It didn't feel like a bustling capital. It felt like a place holding its breath. When they reached the council hall, the massive black dome loomed over him like a watchful eye. Inside, the air was cool and heavy. 10 alien elders sat in a half-circle, their robes flowing like liquid silver, their eyes sharp and unblinking. In the center of the room stood 2 women, or rather 2 Varexian sisters. Ethan stopped in his tracks when he saw them. They were both stunning, but in very different ways. The older sister stood tall, her posture strong and proud, her silver facial markings catching the light with every small movement. Her eyes were sharp, almost challenging. The younger sister stood beside her, softer in posture, her gaze lowered, her presence calm yet filled with quiet tension. There was no smile, no warmth, just silence. The elder in the middle leaned forward. "Human Ethan Hale," he began, his voice deep and echoing. "Our people face extinction. A plague took many of our young, especially those able to bear children. Our bloodlines are fading." Ethan didn't speak. He simply listened, though his instincts told him this conversation would not end well. The elder continued. "When necessity demands, our tradition allows us to seek compatible partners from other species. Your kind is rare, but genetically compatible. You have been chosen to help preserve our people." Ethan frowned slightly. "Chosen for what, exactly?" he asked, though he already had an idea. The elder gestured to the sisters. "You will select one of these 2. They are both of noble lineage, both healthy, both capable of continuing the Varexian bloodline. You will choose one. You will take her as your mate." Ethan stared at him. The words hung in the air like a blade over his head. He looked back at the sisters. The older one met his gaze briefly. Her eyes filled with defiance. The younger one kept hers on the floor, her hands clasped tightly together. It was clear this was not an offer for them. It was an order. "You're telling me I have to choose?" Ethan asked slowly. "Yes," the elder said without hesitation. "Refusal is not permitted." The room fell silent again. Ethan could hear the faint hum of the crystal veins in the walls. His mind raced. This was insane. He had heard of colonies doing desperate things to survive, but this felt wrong on every level. He stepped forward, his boots echoing against the polished black floor. He studied them both more closely. The older sister's silver markings framed her strong jaw and proud cheekbones. The younger's markings curved more softly. Her eyes large and bright, even though they refused to meet his. They were both beautiful, yes, but there was more than beauty here. There was pain. There was fear. Something in his gut told him the council wasn't telling him the whole truth. Maybe this wasn't just about survival. Maybe this was about control, power, and politics. He took a slow breath. The elders were expecting him to pick quickly, like a man choosing between two objects. The sisters, though silent, seemed to brace themselves. They probably thought he would pick the older. Her strength made her seem like the obvious choice. Or maybe the younger. Her gentleness would be easier to control. Ethan looked at both of them, then at the council. And in that moment, his decision formed, not because it was safe, not because it was wise, but because it was right. "I choose both," he said. His voice steady. For a moment, there was no sound at all. Then the room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and sharp, angry voices filled the chamber. The sisters glanced at each other, eyes wide, and though neither of them spoke, something passed between them, the faintest spark of hope. The chamber was still buzzing with angry whispers when Ethan left. 2 guards flanked him on either side, their expressions tight. No one had expected him to say those words. Choosing both sisters was not just unusual, it was a direct challenge. To the council's authority, they escorted him to a guest room high inside one of the black crystal towers. It was large but cold, like a place meant to impress visitors, not make them comfortable. Ethan paced for a while, his mind replaying the scene over and over. Why had they reacted with such outrage? If this was truly about survival, shouldn't they be happy with more than one pairing? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door slid open, and the younger sister stepped inside. She closed it quickly behind her and pressed her back against the door. Her eyes darted nervously, as though someone might burst in at any second. "You shouldn't have said that," she whispered. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Said what?" "That I chose both of you." Her hands twisted together. "Yes. You don't understand what it means here." Before he could reply, the older sister entered as well. She walked with the same strong posture as in the council hall, but there was tension in her jaw. She stood between them and crossed her arms. "You have just made enemies. Human, powerful ones." Ethan leaned against the wall, studying them. "Then maybe you should tell me exactly what's going on," he said. The older sister hesitated, but the younger spoke first. "Our names are Lyra and Celine. Daughters of the House of Maravel, we were one of the most respected families on Varix Prime." Her voice trembled slightly, until the plague. And the politics that followed, Celine, the elder, took over, her tone sharper. "Our family controlled one of the largest crystal mines in the Northern Hemisphere. That made us powerful, too powerful for some. When the plague struck, it wiped out most of our relatives. The council seized our lands, our titles, and declared us public assets." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Public assets? You mean property?" Celine didn't flinch. "Yes. Property to be used for the good of the people. But in truth, we are prizes. Tokens in the games between the ruling houses. Whoever marries one of us gains leverage and prestige." Lyra's eyes glistened as she looked down. "They never meant to give you a choice. They already decided which one you would take." Ethan tilted his head. "Which one?" "Me," Celine answered without hesitation. "They see me as the stronger match for you, more politically useful." Ethan let out a slow breath. "So by choosing both of you, I just tore up their plans." Celine nodded. "And made yourself a threat to the balance of power." There was silence for a moment, broken only by the faint hum of the tower's crystal veins. Ethan walked to the window, looking out over the alien city. Lights shimmered on the wet streets below. But there were few people outside. It felt less like a thriving civilization and more like a place under siege. "So, what happens now?" he asked. Selena's answer was grim. "Now, they will try to change your mind, or remove you entirely." Lyra stepped closer to him, her voice softer but urgent. "You should leave while you still can." Ethan turned to face them both. "I don't run from bullies." Celine gave a faint, humorless smile. "Bullies. These are rulers who've killed for less." A sudden sound from outside made them all freeze. The hiss of the door sliding open. One of the guards stepped in, his silver armor gleaming under the dim lights. "The council requests your presence." "At the banquet tonight," he said flatly. Ethan didn't miss the way the word requests felt more like an order after the guard left. Celine looked at Ethan with a warning in her eyes. The banquet won't be about food. It will be about pressure, manipulation. And maybe worse. Lyra swallowed hard. If you go, they will try to make you choose again, and this time they won't take both for an answer. Ethan thought for a long moment. He knew now that this wasn't just a survival program. It was a political battlefield. He had walked straight into the middle of it. But looking at the sisters, he felt the same certainty he had in the council chamber. He wasn't going to let them be treated like property, no matter what came. Next. The banquet hall of Varix Prime was like something from another world. Black crystal walls rose high into the shadows, lit by floating spheres of pale blue light. Long tables stretched across the room, covered in silver dishes that reflected the glow. The scent of unfamiliar spices hung in the air, sharp and sweet at the same time. Ethan entered between Lyra and Celine, the sisters walking close to him as if afraid the crowd might swallow them whole. The hall was full. Alien nobles in flowing silver robes, their faces painted with intricate patterns of glowing ink. Conversations stopped as the humans stepped in. Dozens of eyes following his every move. He could feel the tension, curiosity, mixed with hostility. At the far end of the room sat the council, 10 elders in high-backed chairs. Their expressions carved from stone. The central figure, the same elder who had spoken before, rose slowly. "Welcome, human Ethan Hale," he said, his voice carrying easily across the hall. "Tonight, we honor your presence." "And your decision?" Ethan kept his face neutral. But he knew this wasn't going to be a celebration. The nobles here weren't cheering. They were studying him like he was a dangerous weapon left lying on the table. They were shown to a smaller table near the center. Celine sat to his right, her eyes constantly scanning the room. Lyra sat to his left, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Every time Ethan tried to relax, he caught someone watching them too closely. The first course arrived, a dish of shimmering blue fruit that smelled faintly like mint. Ethan barely touched it. He was too busy watching the council. They weren't eating either. They were waiting. Finally, the elders stood again. "It has been many years since we last sought a human partner," he began. "Yet here you are, and you have made an unusual request." Ethan could hear the shift in the room, quiet murmurs, some disapproving, some curious. The elder's gaze sharpened. "You have chosen both sisters," he said slowly, letting the words echo. "Do you understand what that means?" Ethan leaned back slightly. "It means I won't let either of them be treated like property," he said, his voice steady. "It means I'm not playing your game." A ripple of shock passed through the nobles. Some whispered furiously, others simply stared. The elder's jaw tightened. "This is not a game, human. It is survival." "Then survival shouldn't come with chains," Ethan replied. Lyra glanced at him in surprise. While Celine's lips twitched as if holding back a smile, the elder stepped down from the dais, moving closer. "You think your words are noble," he said quietly, "but they are dangerous. Choosing one sister keeps the balance between our houses. Choosing both breaks it." "Maybe it needs breaking," Ethan said, not lowering his voice. The room went still again. Every noble within earshot froze. The tension so thick it felt like the air itself was pressing down on them. The elder's eyes narrowed. "Then hear this. If you persist, you will not just face our disapproval. You will face our wrath." Before Ethan could respond, Celine stood, her presence commanding even without raising her voice. "Enough," she said sharply. "We are not bargaining chips to be handed out for political gain." Gasps rippled across the room. It was rare, maybe unheard of, for a Varexian woman to speak against the council in public. Lyra rose slowly beside her sister, her voice softer but just as firm. "If he leaves, we leave with him," she said. "And if you try to stop us, you'll have to kill us both." The elder froze. For a moment, no one moved. Then the room erupted again, this time in chaos. Nobles shouting over one another, some furious, some fearful. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between the sisters and the council. "I told you before," he said, his tone final. "I choose both." The elder's expression turned to stone. "You have made your choice," he said coldly. "Then be ready to live or die." With the consequences, the banquet ended soon after, but not in celebration. The air felt heavier as they were escorted back to the tower. Celine walked with her head high, though her eyes were hard. Lyra stayed close to Ethan, whispering. Just before they reached the door, "They won't wait long. They'll come for you, maybe tonight." Ethan met her gaze, his mind already turning over plans. Let them come, he thought. He had made his choice, and he wasn't turning back now. Asterisk night fell over Varix Prime like a slow-moving shadow. The green clouds above turned darker, and the city's glowing crystal veins pulsed with a dim, eerie light from his room in the tower. Ethan could see the capital stretching out beneath him, quiet. Almost too quiet. Celine and Lyra sat near the long window, speaking softly in their own language, their faces tense. They all knew the banquet had not ended the matter. If anything, it had made things worse. Ethan had seen the way certain nobles looked at him, not just with anger, but with calculation, the kind of look predators give when they're deciding how best to strike. Celine turned from the window, her voice calm but sharp. "They will not attack in the open. It would be too obvious, too messy." Lyra's voice was softer, almost trembling. "That doesn't mean they won't try something tonight." Ethan checked the door controls, making sure it was locked. Then he moved to the wall and pressed his ear against it. The tower walls hummed faintly with a flow of energy from the crystals, but underneath, he thought he heard something else, a faint scrape, like metal against stone. He turned back to the sisters. "Stay away from the windows," he said. They didn't argue, which told him they felt it too. Moments later, the lights in the room flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging them into near darkness. The only light came from the faint green glow of the clouds outside. Lyra let out a sharp breath. "They've cut the power." Celine moved quickly, pulling a thin blade from the folds of her robe. Ethan didn't bother asking where she had been hiding it. He reached for the small emergency lamp by the bed, but before he could switch it on, the door hissed and began to slide open. A tall figure stepped inside. Not a guard. The armor was dark, matte black instead of silver. Designed for stealth, behind him, two more figures slipped into the room, their movements silent and precise. Ethan didn't wait for introductions. A key lunged forward, slamming the door control to block more from entering. The first attacker swung a curved blade, but Ethan caught his wrist and drove a knee into the alien's chest. The hit staggered him, but the second attacker was already moving in. Celine intercepted him, her blade flashing as she deflected his strike and countered with a sharp slash to his arm. Lyra stayed back at first, her eyes wide, but when the third attacker reached for her, she grabbed a heavy glass ornament from the table and smashed it against his head. The alien stumbled, giving Ethan just enough time to drive his fist into the side of the man's jaw. It was chaos, the sound of grunts, the hiss of blades, the crack of boots against the floor. Celine fought like someone who had been trained since childhood, her movements sharp and controlled. Ethan was more brute force, using his weight and speed to overwhelm his opponents. Lyra, though less skilled, fought with sudden bursts of desperation, her strikes wild but effective. Within minutes, two of the attackers were down, one unconscious and the other bleeding from a deep cut on his shoulder. The third made for the door, But Ethan grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "Who sent you?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The alien's glowing eyes narrowed. "You've made enemies, human. You won't live to see another sunrise," he spat, before shoving Ethan away and diving through the door controls. By the time Ethan reached the hallway, the attacker was gone. Swallowed by the shadows of the tower, he returned to find Celine wiping her blade clean, and Lyra breathing hard but unhurt. Celine's expression was grim. This was only the first attempt. She said, "They will keep coming until you are either gone or dead." Ethan looked at both of them. The thought of leaving crossed his mind, but only for a second. "I told you before," he said. "I don't run." Lyra stepped closer, her voice shaking but determined. "Then we fight together," she said. Celine's eyes softened, just slightly, for the first time in years. "I believe we might win." Outside, the city remained silent, but in the shadows, somewhere out there, more enemies were already planning their next move. The real war for the sisters had just begun. The morning after the attack, the city outside the tower looked the same. Green clouds drifting lazily above, crystal towers glowing faintly in the pale light. But inside Ethan's room, the air felt different. The three of them had fought side by side the night before, and that changed everything. Celine stood by the window, sharpening her blade with steady, precise strokes. Lyra sat at the table, turning the broken glass ornament in her hands, the same one she had smashed into an attacker's head. Ethan watched them for a moment before speaking. "If they come again, we need to be ready," he said. "Last night was chaos. Next time, we fight smarter." Celine looked over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "You speak as if we will fight together again." Ethan met her gaze. "We will, unless you're planning to hide behind me." Selena's lips curved into the faintest smirk. "I hide behind no one." He cleared the center of the room, pushing furniture aside to make space. Then he tossed a wooden practice staff toward Celine, who caught it easily, to Lyra. He handed a shorter one. She took it hesitantly, her fingers curling around the smooth surface. Ethan stood between them. "In a fight, you don't need to be the strongest," he said. "You just need to be smart, fast, and unpredictable." He started with Celine, their staves clashing in a series of quick strikes. She was fast, almost as fast as him. Her movements sharp and efficient, but she had a habit of committing too much force to each attack, leaving her open when he caught her off guard and tapped her shoulder with the staff. She narrowed her eyes. "Again," she said simply, and they started over. Lyra was different. She was hesitant, flinching whenever he moved too quickly. Her strikes were slow at first, but Ethan didn't push her too hard. He guided her hands, showing her how to redirect force instead of blocking it head-on. "You don't have to overpower them," he explained. "Use their momentum against them." It took hours, but eventually Lyra managed to twist his staff aside and land a light strike to his chest. Her eyes widened in surprise. "I did it," she whispered. Ethan grinned. "Told you." Training became part of their daily routine. They practiced with staves, with Celine's blade. Even with improvised weapons, heavy objects, ropes, anything that could be used in a fight. Ethan taught them human combat tricks, and in return, Celine showed him Varexian knife techniques. Lyra, though less skilled with weapons, had a sharp eye for weak spots in armor and structure, pointing out flaws that even Celine missed. Over time, the tension between them began to shift. Celine stopped looking at Ethan like he was an intruder. Lyra began smiling more. Small, shy smiles, but they were real. They shared meals, sometimes in silence, sometimes in long conversations about their worlds. One night, as they sat by the window, Lyra asked, "What is Earth like?" Ethan leaned back, thinking, blue skies, oceans that go on forever. Forests so thick you can get lost in them for days. and cities, loud, crowded, full of lights. Lyra's eyes softened. "It sounds alive," she said quietly. "It is," he replied, "and someday, maybe you'll see it." Celine didn't speak much that evening, but when Lyra left to rest, she looked at Ethan. "You are different from the others," she said. "Most would have taken the counsels. Offer and thought only of themselves." Ethan shrugged. "I've seen what happens when people are treated like things instead of people. I'm not letting that happen to you." For a moment, Celine's hard gaze softened, but then she stood, hiding whatever emotion had flickered in her eyes. "Get some sleep, human," she said, though her voice was less sharp than usual. The days passed, and their bond grew stronger, but so did the feeling that the walls around them were closing in. The guards outside their door were replaced twice as often. Messages meant for Ethan never arrived, and sometimes, in the dead of night, he thought he heard footsteps just outside, stopping right at the door before fading away. One evening, as they finished training, Celine paused and looked toward the window. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Ethan listened at first. Only the hum of the crystals, but then a faint rumble far away. It grew louder, deeper, until the glass began to vibrate. Lyra's face paled. "That's not a storm," she whispered. Celine's hand went to her blade. "They're coming. And this time, they won't be sending." Just 3. The rumble grew louder until it was no longer just sound. It was vibration in the floor. In the walls, in the air itself, Ethan moved to the window and saw them. Dozens of shadowed figures moving through the streets below. Their armor black and jagged, carrying weapons that glowed faint red. They weren't council guards, they were soldiers from one of the rival factions Celine had warned about. And they were coming straight for the tower. Celine's voice was steady but low. "They've brought war to the capital. The council will." Claimed they had no idea, but this is their way of letting someone else do the dirty work. Lyra's hands trembled, but she gripped her short staff. "They're here for us, aren't they?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah. And they're not walking away with either of you." The first blast hit the base of the tower, shaking the floor under their feet. Cracks ran up the black crystal walls. The light inside flickering like a dying heartbeat. Ethan grabbed the pack he had been secretly keeping ready: rope, water, medkit, and a compact pulse pistol he had hidden from the council guards. Celine was already moving toward the door. "They'll breach from below and above. We hold the stairs and the windows." Ethan followed, but before they could reach the hall, the sound of shattering glass tore through the room. Hooks on glowing ropes swung in, followed by armored soldiers dropping down like black spiders. The fight began instantly. Celine lunged at the first soldier, her blade flashing in the dim light, cutting through his weapon arm before he could aim. Ethan fired 2 quick shots from the pistol, dropping another who tried to flank them. Lyra, though scared, used the staff, just like Ethan had taught her, low strikes to the legs. Quick jabs to the helmet. One soldier went down with a sharp crack to the knee. They fought their way into the corridor. The hum of the crystals around them now mixed with the roar of explosions outside. More soldiers poured in from the lower stairs, firing short bursts of energy. Ethan shoved Lyra into cover and returned fire. Celine moved like a shadow, striking from behind before her enemies even knew she was there. The corridor became a battlefield of flashing lights and echoing footsteps. The enemy numbers were overwhelming, but the 3 of them fought like a single unit. Ethan knew he couldn't match Celine's precision, but his raw strength and quick aim made a wall the soldiers struggled to break through. Lyra stayed close to him, her strikes landing whenever an enemy got too near. An explosion rocked the tower again. This time from above, chunks of black crystal rained down. Forcing them to duck, Ethan's ears rang, but he could still hear Celine shouting, "There!" cutting through the roof. "We have to move." They pushed toward the main stairwell, only to find it already swarming with enemies. Ethan switched tactics. Firing at the walls instead of the soldiers, the crystal shattered in sharp bursts, forcing their enemies to take cover. Celine used the distraction to pull Lyra toward a narrow maintenance shaft. This way, she called, her voice carrying even over the chaos. The shaft was barely wide enough for them to fit. They slid down the steep incline, boots scraping against the smooth walls, landing hard on a lower level, but the enemy was already there, waiting. Ethan barely had time to raise his pistol before a blast caught him in the side. Pain flared hot and sharp, stealing his breath. He stumbled, almost falling. Ethan. Lyra's voice was panicked. Celine grabbed his arm, pulling him behind a fallen support beam. "You're hit," she said. Her tone clipped, but worried. Ethan gritted his teeth. "It's not stopping me." The soldiers closed in again. There. Glowing weapons casting harsh red light over the wrecked corridor. Ethan forced himself up, leaning on the beam for balance. Celine and Lyra flanked him for a moment. The three of them stood together, shoulder to shoulder, facing the oncoming wave. The first soldier charged, and Celine's blade found his throat. Lyra swept another's legs out, and Ethan fired point-blank into his chestplate. The corridor echoed with the sound of metal hitting the floor, shouts of pain, and the steady rhythm of their defiance. They didn't know how long they could hold out, but as long as Ethan was still breathing, as long as Celine's blade was still sharp, and as long as Lyra's hands still gripped that staff, no one was taking them alive. Outside, the city's night was alive with fire and light. The war for the sisters and for the future of Varix Prime had begun. The sun rose over Varix Prime in pale green light. Smoke still curled up from parts of the city where the fighting had been heaviest. The streets below were littered with shattered crystal and broken weapons. Ethan leaned against the side of the tower's ruined wall, his breathing heavy, his side still burning from the wound he had taken. Celine stood beside him, her blade streaked with dried blood, her silver markings dulled with dust. Lyra knelt on the floor nearby, tying a strip of cloth tight around Ethan's waist to slow the bleeding. "You should be resting," she murmured. Ethan shook his head. "No time. If we don't go now, the council will twist this whole thing into their own story." The council chamber looked different now. Half the elders were missing, either hiding or tending to their own damaged estates. The remaining ones sat stiffly in their chairs, their expressions a mix of anger and forced control. The central elder spoke first, his voice colder than ever. "You have caused chaos, human. The city has suffered for your reckless choice." Ethan stepped forward, ignoring the pain in his side. "My choice didn't cause this," he said. "Your politics did. Your greed did. You treated these women like prizes in a game, and now you're surprised someone refused to play." The elder's gaze hardened. "You have no place to speak in our court." Before Ethan could reply, Celine moved past him. Her voice was steady, but it carried a weight that silenced the entire hall. "He has more right to speak here than any of you." Gasps rippled through the chamber. It was unthinkable for a Varexian woman to openly defy the council like this, but Selena's eyes were sharp, unflinching. "You tried to sell me and my sister like property," she continued. "You told us we had no choice. But we do, and we choose him." The elder's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "You think this will end well for you?" he asked. Lyra stepped forward now, her voice quiet but strong. "We don't care if it ends well. We care that it ends with our freedom." The hall was utterly silent. Ethan felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about breaking something that had been in place for generations. Celine turned slightly toward Ethan, her eyes meeting his. "We don't stand here because you chose us," she said. "We stand here because we choose you." The words hit harder than any blow he had taken. For a moment, the ache in his side, the fatigue in his limbs, all of it faded beneath the surge of something fierce and unshakable. The elder looked at the gathered nobles, perhaps searching for support, but many of them avoided his gaze. They had seen the battle. They had seen Ethan fight for the sisters when others had fled. Some were afraid, others perhaps impressed. Finally, the elder spoke, his voice thin with frustration. "Very well, take them both, but know this, human, you have made enemies that will follow you beyond this world." Ethan gave a faint, humorless smile. "Let them follow, they'll find I'm not easy to catch." The three of them left the chamber together, not as prisoner and protector, not as forced partners, but as something more, a chosen bond forged in fire and blood outside. The city was slowly waking from the night of violence. Citizens stared as they walked past a human man flanked by two Phyrexian sisters. Some faces showed shock, some disapproval, but others? Respect. At the gates of the city, Celine paused, looking back at the towers. "This place will never be the same," she said. Ethan nodded. "Good." They stepped beyond the gates into the open plains. The green sky stretched wide above them. And for the first time in years, Lyra smiled without fear. Celine glanced at Ethan, her voice low but certain. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Ethan tightened the strap of his pack. "Together," he agreed. And with that, they walked toward the horizon, three shadows against the endless light, ready for whatever worlds lay ahead.